Okay, so I think we will get going then. Welcome everyone to this afternoon's webinar being co-hosted by SUMS Consulting and Bisk Education. My name is Marion Hutchins and I'm Head of Marketing and Communications for SUMS Consulting. And today we're talking about long-term opportunities for universities in the sphere of digital learning strategies, a really important topic. And we're going to cover everything from what's going on in digital learning now to what can you do as an individual and as an institution to get going with things. So just before we dive in, I just want to make sure that you have access to various Zoom functions. So anyone who has used Zoom before will probably be familiar with a lot of the functionality here, but you'll notice that your camera and your microphone have been turned off just to provide a quality audio experience for everyone. You should be able, though, to access a Q&A function that's sitting somewhere near the middle and the bottom of your screen. And that will allow you to add questions in throughout the course of the webinar. So please do add those in as something appears to you or comes to you. And then you can click on a question if you're interested in having that one answered particularly. You can click the thumbs up button and that will move it up the priority list. So we will look to answer all of today's questions at the end of the session with our panel of experts that we have with us today. So if we pop along a few slides, I just wanted to tell a few, those of you that are with us, a little bit about SUMS Consulting in case you're not aware of that. So we're going to kick things off with a poll. I'll tell you a little bit about SUMS and then we'll get into the meat of things. So SUMS Consulting is a not-for-profit higher education consultancy, and we work across all areas of professional services within universities. So everything from big change and transformation programs to student recruitment and student experience, timetabling, efficiencies, agendas and work, target operating models, and everything in between. And we've worked with universities across the UK for close to 50 years, a little over 50 years. So our members and clients represent about a quarter of the full-time equivalent in terms of student and staff population and just under a third of the sector spend. And during our time working in the sector, we've worked with institutions across all mission groups. So if we just pop along to the next slide, we'll be able to see some of the institutions we've worked with over the last year or so. So everything from really teaching-focused universities to bespoke colleges, universities that are part of the Russell Group and research-focused. And our aim really is to bring together best practice across the sector for the benefit of individual institutions to help them improve their performance, but also for the benefit of the sector as a whole. So that's what we're here for. So with today, we're going to kick things off with a poll, as we do. If you've joined us for any of the Bisk and SUMS webinars, we always kick things off with a bit of a question for you. So our question today is, how prepared do you think your institution is in terms of expertise, resources, partnerships to employ fully a really comprehensive online program? And you should see that poll up in front of you now. A few different options, everywhere from unprepared to fully prepared. And I would imagine there's people sitting in the middle there. So feel free to pop in your answers now, and then we'll just take a look at what today's attendees think. And we'll be covering in today's webinars, things around key drivers behind digital learning strategies, key elements that support success, and hopefully sort of pique interest in some conversation for further, further conversations either with the Bisk team or SUMS team afterwards. So how are we doing there? Are we ready to show the results? Okay, so I'm not sure if everyone can see that, but essentially we've got, a big chunk of respondents that are feeling sort of moderately prepared. Quite reassuringly, I suppose nobody's in the unprepared position, which is what we would expect hopefully at this point. We do have some, attendees that are feeling poorly prepared and a few that are feeling really prepared. So if there's something you want to pop into the Q&A just to tell us a little bit about what you're doing, feel free to do that. But good to see, that there's some people that are feeling, further along this sort of journey, but there's obviously a lot of work to do. So with that then, I would like to introduce our panel speaking today. So I will hand it over to them and then pop back at the end to facilitate your Q&A. So today with us we have Nick Skelton, Associate Consultant, SUMS Consulting. We have Dr. Richard Seitz, VP Marketing and Learning Experience at Bisk Education. And we have Clynton Hunt, Managing Director and Assistant Vice President, International Partnerships at Bisk. So Clynton, I'll hand over to you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Marion. And Nice to see everyone today and this afternoon from across the UK. Just quickly on Bisk Education, a little bit of background on us. We are a pioneer in online learning. We launched our first fully online MBA program in the mid-90s. And today work with many universities across North America and increasingly around the world. So the company was established in 1971. We're actually celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. We have supported more than 4,000 faculty, so working with faculty to help them be more effective in delivering their content online, their curriculum online, as both as a teacher, but also as a subject matter expert, and working with instructional designers to move those courses that have been so successful on campus to an online form, digital form. We have developed more than 1,500 courses, and the 1,500 courses is unique courses. What that doesn't cover or doesn't count is all of the updating that goes into these courses. There's a lot that changes in the market. The market's changed very, very quickly, and we need to update content very quickly to reflect those changes. So this is just the number of courses, but there are so many updates that go into every single program that and course that we work with our university partners on. And in terms of enrollments, more than 2 million students have enrolled and completed our undergraduate, our postgraduate, and our professional development executive education programs in the US and around the world. Below, you'll see a snapshot of just some of the universities that we work with in the US. And these tend to be universities that we work with on a full range of services. And we'll go through the services a little bit later. But these are universities that we've worked with for quite a number of years now on full credit, undergraduate, postgraduate, and many, many executive education courses. So I'll hand it over to Nick for his thoughts.
Thanks, Clynton. So digital learning has been around for a long time. So as Clynton said, various forms of distance learning have been with us for 50 or 60 years. And what we might now call digital learning has been here for at least 25 years at the start of the World Wide Web. And now we're all suddenly thinking about it. COVID-19 forces us to pay attention to digital learning, whether we like it or not. But some people have been paying attention to it for a long time. So there are answers out there. There's a lot of expertise that you can tap into. And SUMS thinks that how institutions develop will depend on their strategy, their inclination, and their sort of feelings around digital. We may see some sort of segmentation into digital followers, people who might see the campus experience as a key part of what makes the institution what it is. And if any early efforts in digital are pounced upon and seen as failures, that will reinforce their existing way of thinking. Whereas digital leaders, those who embrace the change and want to make a success of it, are more likely to make a success of it. There are real drivers at the moment now for digital learning. So at the most basic, your students can't necessarily get to you. International students may not be willing to come to the UK. Even local students may be unwilling to travel on crowded public transport at this time. If you can get your students to campus, your campuses are limited due to social distancing. You can't fit the students in. All of this has a financial impact on you, and the obvious thing to do is to expand your digital provision in order to make up those numbers. But it's better than that, because you can also improve your offer to students. You can better meet student needs by having an increasing element of digital education within what you do. Now, we see a blend of digital and physical learning working at the undergraduate level. In fact, we see a sort of tier of opportunities for undergraduates, for postgraduates, and continuing professional development. So your typical 18, 19, 20-year-old student is probably still going to want a campus experience. But if you move to a blend of physical and digital learning on your campus, you can provide a better all-round experience for those students. Moving up our pyramid, for older students who may be looking to move careers and retrain, they've been there, done that. They don't want to go to university as a rite of passage, but they are looking for very aligned opportunities with their future careers, and that could work for them extremely well online. So if you're not already looking at developing fully online programs, not just the emergency online programs that we've had to develop since COVID-19, but a more strategic response, then there are some subject areas that will work well, and we'll come on to that later. And at the top of our pyramid, this is an area where we see a huge opportunity that UK universities aren't grasping at the moment for continuing professional development, short courses, something shorter than a traditional undergraduate or postgraduate program. Clynton, do you want to say anything about what you're seeing in the US on these?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, we are obviously, we're very much a market research driven organization. So everything that we do is based around what we're seeing in the market. So when we look at the current situation, the economic situation, financial situation in the US, the UK, and other markets, and we look back and see what has happened in the past during recessions, and then we try to overlay that with COVID, which is obviously very unique. We go to the market and really try to understand what is the market looking for right now. What is the what are the needs? What are the demands? And in the US, at least, we're seeing that 25% of all American adults plan to enroll in an educational training program within the next 6 months. And that's a huge number of people. And why are they doing this? Just as in the UK, there's a lot of concern about their financial situation, their career situation. They may have lost their jobs. They may feel uncertain in their current role. They may look around and say, what's happening in my organization? Are cuts imminent? Am I going to be one of those cuts? Why not me? And so people are very motivated in these times to go back and see if they can improve themselves and give themselves an advantage. And obviously, continue to, develop their skills and knowledge. So when we look at, exactly what are they looking for, 63% plan on taking a non-degree training program. So to your point, Nick, what we're seeing in the US and have seen for quite some time now is a lot of demand in executive education and continuing professional development courses. And that may be a little bit newer to the UK, but it's certainly something that we saw in the 2008 recession. A lot of people were enrolling in these programs. Obviously, MOOCs were doing very well. People really were looking for solutions for their own professional development. 37% are still planning on taking a degree. I mean, higher education historically does well during recessions, and so certainly people are looking to go back to school, finish their undergraduate degree if they never started it or didn't complete it, go on and do their postgraduate degree, and just continue to invest in themselves. How are they planning to do that? So 47% are choosing an online program over in-person or company provided. So when we talk about company provided, at least right now, what we're seeing with businesses is that training budgets are getting cut. We see that in the US. So a lot of tuition assistance programs in the US, those have been scaled back pretty significantly, and I'm assuming that's fairly typical or fairly similar in the UK. So people are looking at their current situation. They're working, they have family. Many of these people are adults. So they're adult learners. They need the flexibility. They need accessibility that online offers. So that's why we're seeing that very high number, 47% are preferring an online program, whether it's non-degree or a degree program versus attending in person. And Nick, you look like you wanted to add something to that. Sorry.
No, not
right.
much more. Thank you,
Okay,
Jason.
so I wanted to pass it over to Richard, actually. And I already made the point, historically, during recessionary times, higher education, does do very well. And certainly COVID has, provided the impetus around the growth of online. But Richard, what leads us to think that when things improve, that we're going to continue to see the growth of online?
Well, I think Nick brought it up earlier when he's talking about the drivers. Why would we ever move a program online? Why would we create an online program? There's a lot of drivers to that, and COVID's no different. The only thing that makes it different is it's universal to all of us. That it's not one institution is deciding this program be a great, opportunity to go online. All of us we have to, and we have to move to that. So while we may be getting into it, I think the residualness of it's really going to be dependent upon the level of effort made to address these issues and address that one particular driver. If it's a temporary stand-in, if we're doing, you know, Zoom calls and things like that as the primary form of instruction, there's not a lot of that to be residual. It can be stopped and we can go back to on ground. But if universities build programs out and build complete online digital instruction, there's a lot that's still there. The lift next time is much smaller than the first time. So it's going to encourage, I think, many of these universities to stay online and to offer these programs. And then the flip side of that is the consumption strategy of learners. You mentioned many of these here, Clynton, that as people become more used to and desiring this type of instruction, it's going to create a demand that's going to be residual in the future. So I think both of those drivers, given the current state we're in, is going to lead us to maintaining a certain level of online instruction, regardless of you know, the world or the state of the world.
Yeah, and I think what we see certainly in the US is there's a sort of a tactical shift right now, and it's an imperative. It's out of necessity, but increasingly universities, and certainly the universities that we're working with, are looking, if they're making the investment, they don't want it to be a very short-term investment. Sure. So they want to be able to continue to you know, get a return on the investment that they're making now, which may be driven by a short-term need, but really seen an opportunity for the long term. So switching it back to Nick.
So this is a quick summary of the online learning market here in the UK. So people often think, why would my university even want to compete in online when the Open University exists? Well, the Open University does have a very large slice of the pie. It takes up about 2/3 of the current online market in the UK. But the whole online learning provision in the UK at higher education level is only 8% of higher education provision here. So there is huge opportunity there for growth for a large number of institutions. You might also think, well, why would my institution do this, and where am I going to find my students? Am I competing in a global marketplace? Well, to some extent you are, but actually what we see is that most online students are from within country, and a surprisingly large number are from the local city region. It appears that students really do want to study at a relatively local university, even if they are doing 90, 95, 100% of that online. So there are opportunities there for you in developing an online provision if you think about your institution and what your strengths are, and if you can offer those well in person, you can probably also offer those well online. The sweet spot, if launching the programme, are professional master's programmes. These are the ones which are probably easiest to offer and which have been most successful for those pioneers. But we're now also seeing some sort of diversification beyond that. Do you want to say anything here, Clynton, about what you're seeing in the US?
Yeah, so just on a couple of things here. So obviously, the Open University, very, very well established and well regarded. It's been in the market for many years. I don't know that there's necessarily an equivalent in the US, but certainly with the advent of online, we did see a lot of very big companies, for-profit universities that really led the charge in the earlier days. And universities, I think, much like some in the UK, would be looking at the market back then and saying, well, look at this huge behemoth that we're actually going to be taking on if we develop our own online programs. But many have. I think the vast majority of universities in the US now have, it's certainly at the master's level, a either fully online or a blended program. And that's not just the big, the universities that the Ivy Leagues and the universities that we've all heard of. It's the regional universities as well. And to your point, they do very well because individuals, although the world is open to them, they can enroll in or apply to any online program that's available to them anywhere in the world. They still like the familiarity. They still like to have their institution be within sort of the proximity of where they live. They like to be able to see it. Many of them are never going to actually visit apart from graduation. But there certainly the familiarity factor is strong, and people will tend to apply to institutions that they're familiar with and they're actually close to.
Yeah, and I was going to chime in on that. I'm both in charge of marketing and our learning experience design. But on the marketing side, a large part of what we do is driven regionally around that university even being online. So it is about brand, it's about knowledge, it's about comfort with that university, which produces the greatest number of enrollments for them. As we get into some of our, and you saw earlier the slide with some of our university partners, the larger brands that are out there, they can, you know, create demand and interest beyond their regional areas, but still the major drivers of those regional areas. So I think that's always good to reflect on that. And Clynton brought it up. It's whether, you know, you can see it or touch it, but you're comfortable with it, you know it, and it's a brand that you're willing to, you know, to take part in.
So let's move on a little and talk about what you can do next. So one of the things to look for is where you might get your help from and how much you might do in-house and how much you might need partners for. So there's a spectrum here. This is a little simplistic. And SUMS doesn't think that any university is really going to be at either extreme of this. But at one end of the spectrum, we've got in-house provision, where you're doing everything in-house. You're developing your learning materials, you are translating those to online, you are delivering that online. You need the underlying technology platforms, you need the experience in learning design and understanding what works online, and you share that expertise across the institution. If online is going to be important to you, you will want to build up your in-house capacity and you will want to develop your expertise. But doing everything, including all of your technology platforms online, is probably unrealistic. If you move to the middle, you may want a mix of what you're providing yourself and what you're bringing in from third parties, whether that's technology platforms or whether that's expertise and understanding in what works online and helping you develop your learning methods and your learning materials and make those as good as you possibly can get. And there are multiple suppliers, Bisk is just one of them, who are out there and who can help you with that. And then at the far end of the spectrum, you've got the online program management or OPM model, where you can have a private provider who can come in and they will help you develop the entire course from scratch, and they will even put up the capital and the investment for you to help launch that course. So you've got options there, depending upon how strategic you see online. If you're just dipping your toe in the water, you're more likely to need more help. If you're seeing online as more strategic for you, you may still want a partner, but you may also want to develop your in-house expertise. Let's move on.
So just before I switch to the next slide, just wanted to make a point here that when we talk about, or when we think about in-house provision and fee-for-service and full-service partnership, it's not just about developing courses. It's not just about having faculty trained to be able to deliver those courses. There is so much more that goes into developing and delivering, deploying these types of programs in order to make those successful. So you've got all of the marketing activity, all of the student support services that an institution already has in place for their on ground, their classroom programs. It's a little bit different for online programs, and the needs of the individual students are very different. For those, for those who attended some of our earlier webinars and talking to our instructional design team and our faculty development team, really, they are a different type of student, whether they're undergrads who are being, reluctantly forced to go remote, or these are people who are choosing to be enrolled in a fully online program. There are different considerations and they do face different challenges. So that the idea of in-house provision is not just about building courses. It's about all of the other things that go into making sure that those courses are successful and those students are ultimately successful.
Thanks, Clynton. And just to add to that, there's an analogy I've come across before. Working with a partner here can be like working with a personal trainer compared to watching YouTube videos to try to understand what you're doing in the gym. If you are working with someone on a regular basis, you are going to learn from their experience, and hence you are going to be much more productive. You'll know what works quicker and you will get up to speed quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Good analogy. So just in terms of that full partnership, and obviously Bisk is, as I mentioned earlier, is a pioneer in online learning, and our model has historically been a traditional OPM, online program management model, where we're making investments in all of these services and working very closely with the institution to bring those programs to market. And there's a lot that goes into the planning around, what courses make sense for online, and it changes. It's the market as the markets evolve. Programs that we wouldn't necessarily have thought might work online today actually makes some sense online, as people are more open to the idea of not just leadership and management online, business and management courses, but other courses, other types of programs. We are seeing a shift into a whole range of courses or programs that are now coming online. But in terms of the services that an online program management company like Bisk would offer, strategic planning, so research, very, very important right at the outset to make sure that the market's there and the courses that the market is looking for in an MBA program and some of the specializations are being offered. The marketing services, it is a very, very big investment to take these programs online, whether it's a postgraduate degree program or professional development certificate programs. The investments required for the success of those programs are not insignificant. Student success, I've already mentioned that. There are different types of students. They have different needs and different challenges. Within our organization, we have a very large team of counselors who work with students right from the outset and right through that entire learning journey through graduation and even beyond. Corporate learning, just supporting those relationships, but learning experience, Richard's team, the team some of you may have met in earlier webinars, so help working with faculty to develop a vision for that course, that program that may have been a classroom program. How do we translate that into something that is going to be impactful as a digital program online, and then obviously working with faculty to make all of that happen. So this is the traditional model, and that is changing. And the previous slide where Nick showed the fee for service, which is more of what we sort of consider as unbundled. That's universities who are saying, we actually feel pretty good about this. We've invested in technology. We have a learning management system. We have a technology stack that we're developing some comfort with. We may not be as effective as we would like to be, and we do see that with most universities. But we are increasingly feeling self-sufficient in terms of some of these areas, but we definitely need support in some of these other areas. So that's where we see a move towards sort of unbundling a service. So Richard, I actually wanted to ask you, as we see an increasing move to the unbundling of services, what do you think is the impetus? And what are the changing models that we're starting to see away from the traditional OPM model?
Well, it really, there's two things that are driving this from an OPM or a bundled service to a fee for service. And one, it's market maturity. That this has been going on since the late 80s, early 90s as schools tried to dabble with it. But back then, it was binary. You were either online or you weren't. And there weren't other systems that were affected by it. An instructor may have part of their course online or teach part of it online. In the early and mid 90s, I was working as a grad student helping build online courses, and they really were just opportunities for people to share information, to have experiences together, and to do some rudimentary instruction online. But the university didn't change. Nothing else changed. It was just these courses that we had available and that we were making available. So that's one thing. As the market has become more and more mature, universities have created, as you were saying, Clynton, these different kind of skills that they have internally, and they don't need the full bundle. And then there's technology. So not many years ago, there was limited technology. There were basic LMSs or learning management systems that you would load things into, and you would deal with the consequences of such. But as it gets more and more technology out there to support the entire gamut of learning, universities themselves have it, from online registration to student and faculty support. All of those things that were once being handled on ground and in a support of an online course are now online themselves. So there's not a need for that full service. But it's hard with all of us, scale. Can we scale all skill sets equally? And the answer usually is no. So there's reach out to say, we're really good at this and that, but we need help with some other part of it. For example, student success. We've really gotten good at our marketing. We've built great courses online, and we're ready to go. We just have a hard time maintaining communication and collaboration with our students through that student life cycle. And that's one example of those, excuse me. And then the preparation of faculty be another example. We've got all these things here, but our faculty aren't ready to move online. We need to grow and develop them as they go forward. So I think that's, you know, both market maturity and technology are a lot of the drivers for universities looking to have very specific support in the area of online instruction.
Great.
This is a summary of some of the research SUMS has done by talking to universities up and down the UK to try and identify those leaders in digital education and what it was about those institutions. What did they have right that was helping them to succeed? The first thing that really sort of jumped out at us was around leadership and strategy. If you have a clear learning strategy, then that will help you develop a clear digital learning strategy. If you have a clear digital learning strategy, then you're really on a roll. And you need to think about your teaching there. It is not the technology that is important. It's about developing a digital learning strategy that works for you and your institution for active learning by your students. Once you know what you want to do, you need that expertise. You'll need some of that in-house and you will need some of that from partners. You'll need to develop that sort of core competency in digital education, and then you're going to want to share that across the institution. We've seen some institutions where every school and faculty is taking a different approach to digital learning, blended on campus and online programs. That is not going to work well. You're not going to be able to provide a good student experience if you have not had a shared approach across the institution. I've seen stories of students enrolled on online courses who get all the standard emails that goes to students around turning up in person to register for this and that and the other, and then their individual school have to send out, oops, sorry, that email wasn't meant for you, here's what we really meant, corrections. You need to develop a shared approach and make this consistent across your institution. And then finally, the most basic, but it really is fundamental, you do need strong underpinning technology. You want technology that works, is reliable and is easy to use. And without that, you won't have the confidence of your students or the confidence of your academic staff who are using it. So leadership, expertise, a common approach across the institution and technology platforms are the things we think are most important. I'm sure we've got other people on this call who have their own thoughts on what makes success. And please add some of that in the Q&A, or we'll bring that up again in the discussion later. Richard, Clynton, you want to come in and add anything more on this?
No, I think this is this is a great slide to show both direction and the complexity of making this choice. And again, going back to why moving to fee for service and such is because there are universities that have certain parts of these that they're good at and that they don't have access to. As with all larger organizations, maintaining cutting edge technology so that you're pushing and having seamless platforms is very difficult, and it's hard to do, and it's hard to do to scale. And really balancing that technology, because you're right, and I think we'll get into later when we start talking, the issue of quality is going to come into this. And if you have, you know, very poor technology, it will affect the quality of that experience for the student, and then that will have an effect on the university in time.
Let's move on to our last one or two slides, and then we'll open this up for some discussion. Clynton, I think this is one.
Yeah, so I think this follows on a little bit from the previous slide. So which courses then are likely, you know, you've got all of the other variables in place. So then how do you decide what you're going to take online? And this is obviously one of the challenges, going back to the earlier slide. One of the areas that we focus on right at the outset, working with our university partners, is which programs do they have that make sense, and what is the market? What are we seeing from the market? So this is sort of the outcome of the research that we do to try and identify what those top opportunities are. And what we're looking at here is just, it may be difficult to see on the screen, but what we're looking at here is the example is a certificate model. So this is professional development, specifically in management. So the process that we go through is we really look at four things. We're looking at the competitive market. So what's out there? So if we feel like change management. You know, change management is a great course. We want to look at a course in that. What's the competitive situation in the market? Is the market already inundated with change management, which is going to potentially, produce some challenges for us in terms of being able to achieve success? What's the job market look like? We look at, we use resources like Talent Neuron. So we'll go back and we'll look at programs, existing programs. We'll look at HESA data in the UK. We'll look at IPEDS data in the US. Identify what's been successful so far to date. Look at the competitive market. Look at the job market. Are employers looking for people with change management skills, or public policy, or healthcare management, or some of these areas that are in that top opportunities area? Look at Google searches. What are people actually looking for? So at Google AdWords. And then finally, when we talk about the competitive environment and we talk about the labor market, we also need to look locally. So we can look broadly nationally, but we know that people are actually looking at their local institution. So what is for your institution, what's the situation like in your specific market? There may be big competitors, but if they're in the north of the country, they may not be necessarily direct competitors to you. You may lose a few to those institutions, but there may be an opportunity for you regionally that doesn't exist for some others in other parts of the country. So those are some of the things that we look at, and obviously demand and volume for certificate programs, for professional development programs is a big driver. For degree programs, it may be slightly different. It may be accessibility. You may be a leader in a particular area, but you're not able to attract people from the north of the country or the south of the country because they physically cannot get to campus. You're targeting adult learners, and these are people they have families, they have jobs. So while as much as they would like to attend that, participate in that, or enroll in that degree program, it's just not practical for them. So accessibility and flexibility, which is very, very important, is one of the major drivers of online. That would be a big determinant for a postgraduate program, not so much, the volume opportunity. So as I mentioned previously, when we think about what's successful in online, it has changed. So leadership, management, data science courses, all of these courses that have, blockchain a few years ago was huge, and people all of a sudden wanting to launch blockchain courses. That is starting to change. And I just wanted to, Richard, obviously you manage the LXD team within Bisk. What are we seeing in terms of some of the subject areas that in the past we may not have seen? Some of the programs that universities are now coming to us wanting to take online, that's a little bit different from what we saw even 5 years ago.
Absolutely. And again, with technology and the opportunities of producing digital instruction in different ways than we have in the past, it's moving more from the data science, the management, those kind of hard business skills, which were the early ons, into health sciences, human genomics, things of that nature, building courses to support that. So it is changing as, again, the market matures, universities get better at it, and they can see some opportunities to kind of develop new programs and new topic areas to expand their portfolios. So we are seeing a lot, although this graph kind of demonstrates clearly what a certificate model would be, and kind of those ways of looking at what makes sense to get into the market with.
Okay, I'm just going to say a little bit about what might happen over the longer term, and this is here to sort of provoke some discussion. I'm keen that people look outside of the higher education sector for their ideas and their inspiration. There is a lot we can learn from others. So what is a university and what does it do, and who else does things that are a little similar? TED makes enormous resources available for free online to the world, but they charge $10,000 if you want to attend their flagship events in person. That's quite an interesting business model. You look at The Guardian, which is an organisation not for its members. It's an organisation for the public, but it's got a real funding issue. What have they done? They've launched a membership funding scheme where you pay £12 a month and you feel good that you're supporting The Guardian. You get access to their content without nags, and you get invitations to exclusive events. could you as a university provide value to your students that goes beyond their time at university? Could you launch a membership scheme for your alumni where they're paying you 10, 15, 20 pounds a month? You are providing them with resources and exclusive invitations that they actually genuinely appreciate and value. I suspect a lot of universities could. And in the current world, people expect something for their donations other than just a sort of warm, fuzzy feeling that they're supporting their former institution. And the last picture there is from a very small organisation called the Do Lectures, which is one of the best educational opportunities which I've been privileged enough to attend. It's run on a shoestring from a cowshed in West Wales. They have top speakers from business and from universities. They record everything they do, they put it out for free, and they charge for attendance. So you don't have to have huge resources to do this. What you need is the willingness to think about this and to challenge how you do things at the moment and take some calculated risks on starting some new ventures. That's about all I wanted to say at this point, and I think we'll open this up for some questions and discussions at this point, and I'm interested to see what questions people have and what their thoughts are on how this is going to develop over the next few years beyond COVID-19. So, Marion.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, Clynton, and Richard. That was quite interesting, and there's been some interesting, a few questions in our Q&A, but some interesting comments on Twitter that I'll bring into things as well. So, Mike was wondering, which I suppose we kind of touched on when we talked about which courses might be most appropriate for online delivery. But what's the completion rate for online courses for people who are working full time and might find it difficult to consistently make time to focus on schoolwork?
Richard, do you want me to take that, or do you want to take that?
Well, you can certainly start. I'll
okay.
Follow.
I mean, it depends on the program. Is it an undergraduate program that they're enrolled in, or is it a postgraduate program? And also, it depends on the subject area. Is it a liberal arts, or is it an engineering degree? We see, though, generally very, very high rates of completion. Certainly in postgraduate. So our enrollment through graduation rates are very, very high, and sort of in the 90% for master's level course programs, and a little bit less lower on the undergraduate side. And again, it differs by institution and it differs by program, but a big part of that success is driven by that relationship that the institution and their partners like Bisk have with the individuals, with the students, and really trying to help them work their way through, that program. So that's a big factor in the ultimate success of those individual students. Richard?
Without a doubt, that's what I was going to say. Is we see very high rates of completion because the threshold to start is really what drives most adults when they do, especially postgraduate, most specifically postgraduate, because they know the cost that's going to be associated. They know the gains they're going to get from doing it. They've already made all these decisions in their mind when they start. And so the threshold is a little less. As we all know, if I'm going to university, that when you're starting in your undergraduate, it's hit or miss. Every other day could be your last day. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. But there's not as much of that with the kind of working adults. They make time. They wouldn't, most of the time we see they wouldn't step into it if they didn't have the opportunity to make that time. They could be successful.
Yeah, really good points. And it's sort of an interesting, I guess, something to bring in here that was mentioned on Twitter was the importance of dedicated student support in online program provision, and that really needs to be integrated with whatever's provided for students on campus as well. So I just wondered if you had any thoughts. I know, Clynton, you mentioned, Bisk has counselors and things like that are available to advise students. So I just wondered if you could comment on that at all.
Well, certainly restating the point that's made, that it's absolutely critical. And those counselors really they are experts on the institution and on the program. These are not generalists who are just there to answer the phone and try to as best they can fumble through support. They are very well versed in all of the the values of the institution. They understand the resources available within the institution. They have access to faculty, so they can actually engage directly with the faculty that a student, for a course that a student may be having problems with. And they really are sort of a conduit to the institution and to those within the institution that can actually help these individuals. So we Bisk and our student success team, as well as others in the market, really see ourselves as an extension of the institution, and make sure that the individuals that are supporting those students are experts, in the program and the university itself. Do you want to add anything to that, Richard?
I was going to say, one of the critical things is that when our on-campus student support is fundamentally important. We've always known that at university, you've got to be able to have that support, guidance, advising. Just like with instruction, we just can't take and plop that online and think it's effective. We have to manage that online student support much differently than we would on campus. There's not as much face-to-face. It's happening over different periods of time versus office hours, all of those things. You have to think through it and have it to be truly effective, because they're going to need that. They are in a class of themselves. Even if they're doing some synchronous learning and things like that, they're in this little box that we're all sitting in now and doing their work. And so we need to have effective support for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think everyone's on the same page with that in terms of importance. I'm going to come back to a second question from Mike in just a minute, but there's another sort of practical question around, is assessment also taken online? So for some of those more hands-on subjects like science and engineering, what are the options in terms of assessment for students?
I'll start with that and then hand over to Clynton and Richard. SUMS is actually doing some research on this at the moment and looking into best practice, and we'll be publishing some materials on this over the next couple of months for our members, so look out for that. The short answer is you can do assessment online in many ways, and there are some subjects where it is obviously much easier than others. But there is real creativity going on across the sector at the moment in online assessment in all fields. And actually it's those fields which are most difficult, something like mathematics, where for example you have mathematical notation, which is difficult to input into a computer, where there is the most innovation and the really interesting developments. You can also use video for online assessment. You can run a oral examination in languages online. And there are huge advantages to moving online. For starters, those marking the work don't have to deal with unreadable student handwriting any longer. And the markers really love that. And for the students, it's a much more real-world assessment if they're being assessed online. And they may be using some of the tools that they would be using in their professional life. It's actually become almost an unnatural situation to expect students to go into an examination hall for 3 hours with literally a pen and paper as the only tools available to them. It's not representative of what they're doing in their course or what they'll be doing after their course. Anything further?
Yeah, and Richard, this is definitely your area and the LXD side. I just wanted to mention there are questions that I always get are around proctoring and things like that, and there are those solutions are readily available, and we've used a number of them, and they certainly address some of the concerns that institutions have around assessments, etc. But Richard,
I think that there are dozens and dozens. This goes to Nick, to your point. I mean, the creativity out there is growing more rapidly as people are obviously more moving online. But there are things that online labs. There are applications and systems that support that. One of them and I'm skipping on the name at this moment, but it allows for computer coding, and that students can go in there and they can code in the system, and it runs as though it would in an application, so they can test the quality of that. And so while it's it's a little more formative in assessment, you can do kind of a post-course assessment with that as well, and measure and test that. And that seems rather obvious, like that should have come out early on, but it's relatively new in the way they support the lab. Sciences and things of that nature, where you have to touch and you have to see, there are different ways, but it is certainly you're gonna have to be creative in thinking about what's the intent of the assessment, what are we looking to measure, and build accordingly. But new technologies are out there, and they're growing by the day.
Yeah, absolutely, Richard. And sort of related, I suppose, maybe something we covered in a previous webinar was just around monitoring engagement. So, what are we doing to monitor remote engagement and analytics and looking at dashboards and making sure, I know we touched on the last webinar about intervening at appropriate points. So what's available in terms of monitoring that?
I think, and I'll just throw my 2 cents in. There's 2 levels on that. There's one, obviously, with logging into an LMS. We know when people are coming and going, when they're there, how long they're there. There's some merit and some value to that, keeping an eye on it from a student success side. But there's also, when we talk about moving online, there's an instructional obligation for the faculty to keep an eye on engagement, just as they would in a classroom, just as they would do that. So there's different tiers and different levels that you can see, and obviously missed assignments as you're going in. It's obvious, it's easier to see because they're aggregated in these technology systems that we're using, the platforms they use. But it's important, 1, to understand the different levels of engagement, and 2, strategies for addressing the lack of engagement when it occurs.
Yeah, the analytics behind the technologies, the learning management systems, etc., is really important for identifying those potentially at-risk students very, very quickly before they get to the point where they're really just abandon their study and they're wanting to look elsewhere. And that's something that we keep talking about student success, but that's such an important part of supporting students and making sure that they actually ultimately able to achieve the objectives that they have for themselves. Understanding what some of those at-risk factors are, and then tracking those through analytics, and then being able to put a human face to that, and obviously that the relationship that the student has with their counselor is very, very important. So use technology, but ultimately it comes back to that human connection, having that relationship with the individual student.
Yeah, absolutely, Clynton. I know we talked about how important that connectedness was with tutors, with classmates, with the institutions, and a sense of community, both at sort of undergraduate and postgraduate levels. So it's there's going to need to be more focus on that, isn't there, going forward?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. Another question here. What is the level of personal tutoring and mentoring in an average purely online course? So I suppose this is around, resource requirement in terms of supporting students through these kinds of things.
I'm not sure that there is an average. I think every course is very different. Degree programs, so postgraduate and undergraduate, are very different from from a professional development as a certificate program. And I think obviously an undergraduate student, as we talked about in previous webinars, has different needs and different drivers than a postgraduate student does. So in terms of what the average is and what the norm is, it's very difficult to say, to provide a sort of precise answer to that. Tutoring is becoming, having that teaching assistant or those resources available either directly from the faculty or from within the school itself, very, very important for student success as well. It's not just about, supporting students when they're having trouble, completing their assignments, but it's also helping them work through the problems that they're having with the subject matter. And so having the necessary resources is absolutely critical. Richard, obviously, again, back to you, and just in terms of the LXD and the course side of things, what are you seeing in terms of the support for students with tutoring and other types of solutions?
Well, I think generally and obviously that the more the engagement, the better. So if this is how much do I need to be involved in order to achieve this course and have an effective student experience, you can't have too much engagement almost. So if it's an asynchronous course that student is self-running and things of that nature, they're probably going to need some more of that. But if it's a fully synchronous and there are multiple meeting times every week and or classmates are meeting together, as those levels of engagement increase, it would theoretically decrease the amount of tutoring and support that you need, because it would be be self-managed by the learners. And again, it's subject and it's all those other things, but I think engagement is the number one way of addressing that.
We touched on some of this earlier in our series of events. So much of this is about building community online, and it's worth putting the effort in up front at the start of the course to build that community so that students are supporting each other. and so that the lecturers are engaging with the student. And if you can get that to work well up front, you'll have more success over time, and then the lecturers can take more of a back seat. And there are different ways of resourcing this for a large university. So you may have the course led by senior academics, but some of the personal support can come from teaching assistants, can come from PhD students who are also working as teaching assistants and others, so that you've got both the expertise and that higher level of engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Nick. I just want to answer Mike's question quickly, which just about was about how does Bisk and SUMS deal with conflict of interest when they're supporting institutions that are competitors in the marketplace? And if maybe I can kick off answering this from the SUMS perspective, and then Nick, feel free to jump in. That our focus is really on making sure universities are aware of what sort of innovative opportunities are available to them, and the technology and the specific solutions they decide to implement are up to them in terms of what they want to do. But I'm just thinking, Nick, about some of your work with institutions across the sector in similar areas. It's really about making sure universities are aware of what best practice looks like, where they sit against that, and then what options are available to them. Would you agree?
Yes, so just to add to that, for those who may be less familiar with SUMS, SUMS is a member-led organisation. SUMS is its members. It is effectively a consortium of 20 or so universities that make up SUMS. So we will do the right things for our members, and that will involve working with a large number of partners, because we don't have all the expertise and all the answers within SUMS. We've got a lot of resource we draw upon, and a lot of that is from our members who do share their best practice. But where we haven't got it within SUMS, we'll look outside. And one of the reasons we are doing this work currently with Bisk is we want to look beyond the UK. We want to look to where the innovation is happening in the US and in other countries.
Yeah, Clynton, Richard, is there anything you wanted to say on that, or should we move on? We have got a couple more questions that have popped in.
I think we can move on. That was good. Yeah.
So this is a really interesting one that I think brings in the sort of the accessibility and equality and diversity and sort of inclusion element of online learning as well. Joanne's wondering, what can or should institutions do to reduce the digital divide to ensure there's equality of access, equity of access in online and digital learning? I was chatting with somebody who was working with students that were hard of hearing at universities, and actually because they're not sitting with people in a room, that right away sort of automatically makes them feel a bit more removed from the situation when they already feel like there's a bit of a challenge. So yeah, could you comment on that then?
I'll start on that one. I was talking to a friend at the Open University about this, who was somewhat frustrated that when universities started moving online, everyone immediately worried that this would cause disadvantage, because the Open University was a distance university established a long time ago to improve widening participation, to make education available to people who may not previously have been able to access it. And it has been extremely successful in that. And what the technology does is it changes things. So it's important that we do an equalities assessment and we understand the impact when we move to a different mode of provision, but we shouldn't think it'll automatically make things worse. So it's about providing those opportunities. And where there isn't equity of access, that might be through the things you can do to fix that might include things like loaning out mobile broadband dongles or laptops. It's not a perfect solution by any means, but it's a help. So there are things you can do, but think about it positively.
We certainly, as we're developing courses, we're obviously very cognizant of the individual needs of that people might have, where all of our courses are ADA compliant. We want to make sure that the information that is being shared is accessible to everyone, including people that may have some form of disability, to make sure that we're addressing that specifically, and then developing that community, making sure that they've got the resources available to them that are going to be necessary for them to be successful is again very, very, very important. Richard?
No, I think there's a lot of challenges that we face, and it's both the technology, it's the internet pipeline, it's addressing learner challenges, whether they're disabilities or they're just the preferences and the way that they have time. I mean, all of those things to create a sense of equity is important, because we can just go and put something online. It's easier now today than it's ever been to do it almost immediately. But does that address all the issues that are there? It's a complex question, and it certainly needs to be, to be top of focus.
There are things within the technologies themselves. There is, when you look at media players, they are designed to be able to identify low bandwidth areas, so that the media can be adjusted to accommodate, a low bandwidth scenario. So as much as we can, when we are looking at a technology stack and technology solutions, we're thinking about not just those people in the inner city or in the big cities where there's a big fat pipe and there's no issues. It's how do we make sure that people out in more rural areas and we're obviously thinking globally as well, in countries where internet access is maybe mobile, making sure that everything is mobile ready, so that people can access their courses on their phones versus having to do it on their on the computers. But so there are certainly technology solutions that don't necessarily solve everything, but they can certainly address some of the challenges.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking a really practical example that somebody brought up around closed captioning. And if you're in a course that has a lot of technical vocabulary, is the standard closed captioning function effective, and will that work well enough? So it's thinking about what's relevant for different kinds of courses, I suppose. So I'm aware we've gone a few minutes over. So I just wanted to ask the panel: is there anything you'd like to leave us with? Any closing thoughts or key points you think we should take away from this?
I'll leave that one to Richard. I mean, I think this has been a great discussion. I really appreciate the questions that we've had. I think it's been very, very positive, and I thought the questions have been very thoughtful. So thank you.
I just appreciate the opportunity to join in and participate. Thank you all very much.
Thank you everyone for joining us, and I'll just sum up by saying a little bit about what happens next and what else is coming up from SUMS. So we do substantial research on a whole range of fields. As I mentioned earlier, we've got a piece coming up soon on digital examination, so look out for that. You can look back on this previous series of events on digital learning. If you go to our website and look at the events, they're available there. And we also have the SUMS annual conference coming up on the 27th of November, just announced. That, of course, will be an online event this year, as so many more are, and we will be looking at opportunities to transform the sector at that event, including a piece on digital learning. In the meantime, if SUMS and Bisk can help you and your institution, please do get in touch. Email address for me and for Clynton are available there on your slides. And thank you for your time and your contributions today. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, attendees.
Great. Thank you very much.